Welcome back, everybody, into Bill's Chat. I am Josh McCarty. With me, as always, is Luka. Luka, we have waited since the season ended, as I close my laptop in the background, and we have finally made it. It is draft week, and all the talk since February, since the combine, since the Senior Bowl, free agency is behind us, and in just a matter of days, we will know who these amateur players are going to be playing for, what the top of the draft is going to look like. And we are about to embark on our favorite show of one of our favorite shows of the year. A couple of our favorite shows are going to happen this week. Our mock draft. I already know the answer, but I have to ask, how are you doing?
This might be the greatest week in sports for myself, I would say selfishly, but in general, overall, you have certain sports entering their playoff phases at this moment in time. We're sitting here, transparency, recording this on Saturday, and Carolina, Ottawa just dropped the puck about 10 minutes ago, where we have playoff hockey, there's playoff basketball, if that's anyone else's tune. And on top of it all, that feels like kind of the granddaddy because the NFL owns everything, as everyone understands. And it just, with merit, this is draft week and we are in draft week. And as you said, this is one of our favorite shows. It's like picking your favorite child. You really shouldn't, but overall we rank them naturally. This is up there at the top when it comes to this episode we'll be doing in the mock draft. And then what became a last second idea that now is morphed into an annual thing for us. We get our live draft show spectacular later this week. It's what a time to be alive. There is no better feeling than right now. It feels like as a fan that, I can't wait to get this episode going, but then ultimately, the clock has started officially to Thursday. This is going to be a week of a lot of fun, a lot of excitement. And then it's just, we're sitting here recording this on Saturday because Josh, lo and behold, going to be sitting at game one of a playoff game in Buffalo in what feels like forever, because the last time I was in the arena to watch a playoff game, I couldn't even legally drink. So this is just a wonderful, wonderful time.
I love it. I love it. Well, Luka, are you ready to get this draft started?
Hell yeah. Let's do this.
All right. Well, Luka has the odds. I have the evens. So with that, as if you're watching on YouTube, you will see that we are quickly changing our background. And when we get there, Luka will officially be on the clock representing the Las Vegas Raiders.
Well, I'm going to keep this nice and short and sweet because of a very unpredictable draft. I think number one might be the most predictable number one in recent memory. No disrespect to Cam Ward, but even then, some people question if he was truly the number one. I think by the time we got to the draft, it was understood. But it does feel like Fernando Mendoza, for what it's worth, is just the bona fide pick here. So I'm even going to switch the screen and share it already. He is the quarterback prospect of this draft. He also, though, in respect to Mendoza and in disrespect to Dan Orlovsky, he is clearly separated from everyone else in this class. And he has the great body of work that he does in last season, but even seasons prior leading up to his tenure at Indiana, leading them to their first ever national championship in football. It's just, he did it the tough way. He did it in an incredible fashion, and he made all the big throws when needed, on top of just being a quality quarterback through and through. That I think, call me crazy, I really do believe that you're gonna, I don't think Fernando Mendoza is being disrespected in any degree, but it also feels like he's being overlooked just because he's the consensus number one pick in this year's draft. I think we could seriously be sitting week one projecting, who the starters are going to be for the teams where there might be questions at that. And of course, the Raiders did sign Kirk Cousins. I genuinely believe Fernando Mendoza has a legitimate chance to be the week one starter, and wouldn't be remotely surprised if that's the case after a very, very quality camp and preseason, where he turns a lot of heads once he's in the facility and, doing the day-to-day that I think there's a lot of quality to this player that overall he will show why he is the number one pick and why the Raiders finally feel like they have a young, promising quarterback of the future. You know, you could say since Derek Carr, but realistically, it's been a long time previous that they've really had that bona fide quarterback of the future, the young, promising prospect. You know, Jamarcus Russell comes to mind, but that one quickly faded, of course. I love Fernando Mendoza, to be fully transparent. I think he probably wouldn't be the top pick in next year's class, but he would still be in the conversation of being a top 3 guy. And that's just where I would leave that.
And when you look at what the Raiders have at quarterback right now, it certainly sets up to insert somebody who could start right away and really be a factor. They did make the move on Kirk Cousins. That is not a long-term solution by any means. They still have Aiden O'Connell on their roster, but I would think that the shine is kind of off Aiden O'Connell at this point. They went out and hired Clint Kubiak, who worked wonders with Sam Darnold. It only makes sense to get the top quarterback prospect in this draft in-house. Fernando Mendoza, that feels like the slam dunk 1 pick. And I think from that point on, Luka, this draft becomes very unpredictable, as now the New York Jets are on the clock at 2 with me. And what an interesting situation the Jets are in. Aaron Glenn was a first-year head coach, and boy, was it a disaster. As a defense, they had 0 interceptions. They didn't have a receiver have more than 400 yards receiving last year. It was just a comedy, a circus, and how that team with what I just told you didn't wind up with the number 1 pick is astounding. But here they are. Again, they miss out on the quarterback. They're not going to go quarterback here for me. Somehow Aaron Glenn kept his job by throwing both of his coordinators under the bus and bringing in Frank Reich as offensive coordinator and Brian Duker as defensive coordinator. Now, early on, the momentum was toward Arvell Reese out of Ohio State. Recently, there has been a lot of chatter about David Bailey, the edge out of Texas Tech, going to the Jets. And as of this week, he was supposed to come on a top 30 visit, but that was canceled. I am not going to bite the apple on that one, though. I just don't think it makes sense for a team like the Jets that's so far away. They don't have an answer at quarterback. They got rid of Sauce Gardner. They got rid of Quinnen Williams. They're going to have another pick in this draft. They're loaded with picks. They have to build for the future. It doesn't make sense for the Jets to take a player that's going to be 23 years old that doesn't have the ceiling. That's David Bailey. He's safe and he's older. He's an impact player now. The Jets now is kind of irrelevant. They need to swing for the fences. They need an impact player, and that to me is what Arvell Reese is. You can make the case he's the best prospect in this draft. He's one of the best athletes in this draft. You can make him an off-ball linebacker. You can make him an edge rusher. But I feel pretty confident that Aaron Glenn's going to find a position for this kid. And even if it takes him a year to get used to the NFL, that's okay, because the Jets need a 2-year plan just to get back into the average level of play. So I'm going to go with Arvell Reese as the Jets pick.
Yeah, I think Arvell Reese might be low-key one of the most fascinating athletes in the draft. I mean, him and his college mate that is also at the linebacker position. Those are the 2 most fascinating athletes of this draft class that I would say that makes the most sense for the Jets. We've seen a few things. I shouldn't say we've seen a few things that the Jets could do at 2. It's why you make the comment, of course, that this is where the draft already goes off a little bit and you really don't know the predictability of everything. I would say one of the more safer picks is going to be what's coming up here at 3, which is what I will transition into. The Cardinals, well, they have a lot of holes. As someone that likes to watch them very closely, that was not something that took a genius to figure out. But on top of it, they obviously even made the decision to add another problem or question mark to their roster, that is quarterback. The issue that they run into going into this draft, and I apologize, I'm trying to do something as I'm talking here. The issue they run into is, as I talked about at number 1, Fernando Mendoza is the clear consensus top quarterback of this draft class. After him, there's not a lot of guys, and there is an individual that is linked to the Cardinals, and it feels like he is linked to one of 2 teams. It feels as if a lot of the individuals in the know have been discussing, and that is Ty Simpson, the quarterback from Alabama, who is a little small, but overall is what feels to be a quality quarterback prospect, depending on who you're talking to, i.e. Dan Orlovsky. They might even say he's the best quarterback in class. I don't buy that. But overall, between the Jets and the Cardinals, ironically enough here, those are the two teams that have seemed to potentially have a liking for Ty Simpson. But what I will say is the Jets may have interest at him at like pick 33, 34, like right in that top of the second round, not in the first round. And it almost also feels like they're doing this to just put it in the Cardinals' court of being like, hey, this is where we like him. You need to make the decision now on if you want to trade in and get him. I don't think they do that. I think they go with what Josh said, the safe option here, and they end up taking edge David Bailey out of Texas Tech. I think they need a lot of things. And of course, pass rush is very high up on that list. I think what they currently have in the cupboard and everyone that they have on that roster right now is just really not capable of doing a great job, other than Josh Sweat, who did lead their division, funny enough, in sacks. He has been a nice little get for them, but overall, they are still lacking on that defensive line and just getting at the quarterback, while also just being a quality player on the defensive line in the run game as well. That I think David Bailey is going to be a great pro in this league. Do I think he's going to be a superstar and 20-plus sack guy even potentially? I don't know. I have a little bit of doubts, but I do think he is the number one, I'll call it classic edge in this draft. And I just think at 3 here, the Cardinals picking overall, he is what feels to be the right pick moving forward now for a new regime in the desert that I don't see them taking a swing elsewhere. And I also don't see them moving back. I think they want to make this pick happen, and they're definitely not going to be taking a Ty Simpson here. That would be, boy, would that already send shockwaves through the rest of the draft if Ty Simpson were to go here at 3. If they were to even think about Ty Simpson being their first pick, they would be aggressively trying to move back to do so. So at this mock draft where we do not do trades, 3rd overall will be edge David Bailey.
I think it's a good pick. You could have made the argument he could go 2. There's a lot of edge rushers in this class, but Bailey and Reese and then Bain, who we'll get to, I'm sure, fairly soon, are considered a cut above the rest. The one argument you could make is maybe if a team like the Cardinals wanted to address edge later in the draft, or even the Jets, that maybe some of the guys that are projected to go in the late first could follow them. But why wait when you get a guy as clean of a prospect of Bailey? The Cardinals need help rushing the passer. They're playing in a division with Matt Stafford and the Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks. You got to get the quarterbacks to the ground, and they address that in a big way with David Bailey. And that brings up the Tennessee Titans. And they went out this offseason and hired a new coach in Robert Saleh. And he brought with him his defensive coordinator, Gus Bradley. I wanted to say Dan Quinn. I was like, that's not right. He's a head coach. So I think a lot of folks are thinking that the Titans could go defense in this spot. But there's also a lot of momentum toward Jeremiah Love. And again, like I said with Reese, you could make the argument that Jeremiah Love is the best prospect in this draft. The only real concern is, do you take a running back this high? And we've heard some people say that you want to throw positional value out in this draft just because of the lack of the star power in this draft. I think Jeremiah Love is very much going to be tempting to the Titans, and I wouldn't be stunned if they take him. But reading the tea leaves from what I have seen, I get the sense that they do want to add a defensive building block. I think they would have taken Arvell Reese or maybe even David Bailey had they fallen. But there's one more blue chip front 7 defensive player out there that's really kind of an athletic unicorn. And that's going to be the second linebacker out of Ohio State to go in the top 4, Sonny Styles. Just a freakish athlete. He's going to come in and really become the face of this Tennessee Titans defense. And I think with Robert Saleh, who has had some really good linebackers under his watch, whether it was CJ Mosley with the Jets or Fred Warner with the Niners, the linebackers have been the lifeblood of his defense. I think Sonny Styles is a player that can come in and really set the foundation for what they're trying to build. They have a lot of needs in Tennessee, And I'm just not sure that putting a superstar running back really does enough to move the needle, where a player like Sonny Styles could actually reshape the entire defense. And he is just such a unique athlete at that position. And I think that someone like Robert Saleh would just love to get his hands on him.
Yeah, it is what I think the one tidbit that will be fascinating about the Titans at pick 4, just from an outside perspective, because I didn't do the research that you did, but just when you see the link of Jeremiah Love or someone else like a Sonny Styles, that to me will be, how much. I don't want to say it in a weird way, like who's going to overstep the head coach in this situation, but how much pull does like a Brian Dable have? Where I think if you take a Jeremiah Love, you can easily sell it. It makes a lot of sense. I would lose no respect for the Titans doing it. What that would tell to me, though, is that Brian Dable has a legitimate voice in that room. And then on top of it, I think that's playing the long game in the sense of he's going to, they probably don't have everything they need right now. If they drafted him, that he would become a true impact and go out there and win them 5-6 more games, and they would be even flirting with a playoff spot. But if you bring him into the building, you have him sitting there ready to go. And then after a whole nother year, a whole nother offseason, you build everything else around it. I think that's the discussion to be had with Jeremiah Love. When you go with the defensive route here and you take Sonny Styles, that to me feels like the classic solid thing. It makes a lot of sense as well. But overall, you still have enough question marks on the offensive side of, are you supporting Cam Ward enough? That I wonder then ultimately, would they be able to be as equally competitive on the offensive side of the ball going into 2027? In my opinion, I think Jeremiah Love might be able to move that up a little bit quicker than anywhere else they could possibly go with it. So I just find it interesting how much of a voice at Dable, who, is obviously what you would consider to be definitely a top end offensive coordinator in this league, previous head coach, had experience with a premier running back in his offense that succeeded, a la, that guy that went to Philly, not to spurn any Giants fans, but overall, yeah, it will just be interesting. All right, moving on. Don't want to take too much time here. Moving on to those Giants. The Giants, I think at 5 are in an interesting spot, and ultimately I think are going to be what I consider this is a meat and potatoes pick. This is a pick where you need to finally you have your franchise quarterback, it feels like, in Jackson Dart. You have an offense around him, hopefully with everyone coming back healthy, that should be skilled position wise enough, good enough to make things happen for you. The key here, though, are the 5 individuals in front of him good enough to kind of make every play worth it and not get people hurt more and more. Part of that also, injury wise, is on Jackson Dart himself needing to probably wisen up a little bit, not take as many big hits as he would. I think there's that conversation when it comes to injury, but overall, I think their offensive line is just lacking. And everything you see, everything you hear, anyone that's kind of in the know, it feels like, with the Giants mindset, feels offensive line is priority 1 and 2, 1A, 1B, whatever you want to call it. So it will feel like best player available at the offensive line position is the way they're going to go here. Now, the conversation, though, comes to me where who is viewed as that best offensive lineman. And I think tackle is just too great of a need for a lot of teams, and you want to get the best tackle, that they're going to get the best tackle in the draft here, and they have the ability to do that. And whereas I would say me back in November or so would say Spencer Fano is the best tackle in the draft, Francis Magoa, whatever his name is, out of Miami, he is the best tackle in the draft. I don't have the graphic yet. I will be making it after I make my pick. Francis Magoa is just a large freak physical specimen that is a clear number 1 tackle in this draft. I think he is an absolute tone setter. He is a physical, just everything about his game is just incredible. And I was very impressed with his playoff run in its own right, where he was going up against legitimate guys, other first run talent and edges, and was handling his business easily at times. It felt like he might have not even been breaking a sweat. That is the kind of bookend cornerstone you get for a franchise quarterback. If you're the Giants, that should hopefully move that needle further, finally get you in the right direction when it comes to a quality offensive line. That nothing flashy about it. This is your meat and potatoes, but this is the thing you need to do if you finally want to stop picking in the top 5 and, you know, move the needle forward when it comes to successful football. That I would be happy for Giants fans if they ended up with Francis Magoa here. I'm going to say it a billion different ways, so hopefully one of them is correct. He is just clearly the best offensive lineman in the draft. No, let me say, he is clearly the best offensive tackle in the draft. I still love Fano a lot out of Utah, but he is someone that's a little bit more of a moving chess piece to potentially that the Giants are going to just go with the true tackle in this draft, and that is him.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I really, it just depends on how these teams view Fano, because I think he is considered the best prospect, but you're right. Like, there's a lot of concern about his arm length, and I think that's a smart pick for the Giants. Would they be tempted by Jeremiah Love? Would they view that as Saquon Barkley 2.0? There was a lot of chatter that the owner of the Giants was upset when they got rid of Saquon Barkley. Maybe this is his redemption, and then obviously the John Harbaugh ties to Derrick Henry. So I think the Giants, for a lot of reasons, are a pivot point in this draft, because you could see them going a lot of different directions. But we're going to stay on the Eastern Coast side, I guess, with the Cleveland Browns. And this is a team with a lot of needs. They need a quarterback, but it's just too early to pull the trigger on the second quarterback in the draft. I think the Browns are, you know, one of many teams in this spot that would love to trade down, because I think their two primary needs outside of quarterback are wide receiver and offensive tackle. And when you look at what's available on the board, there's now that with the pick the Giants made, there's just not a great fit here. There's been a lot of chatter about Carnell Tate to the Browns. And, you know, it makes sense that he's an Ohio guy. You know, those Ohio State guys always gets linked to the Browns. But ultimately, when you look at what the Browns have at receiver, they don't have much. They have Jerry Jeudy, they have Isaiah Bond, but there's just not a lot that moves the meter there. But the closer we get to this draft, Luka, I just have a hard time viewing Cardinal Tate as a guy that's worthy of going this high. I just don't see it. He's a guy that never really established himself as a number one in college. I realize he played next to Smith, but he's not a freakish athlete, didn't put up freakish numbers. I think you're just forcing the narrative if you try to put him up this high. Now, somebody's got to go 6th, and this is not an elite draft class. But I think when you look at what the Browns did this offseason, they lost Wyatt Teller. They lost Batonio. And DeJuan Jones has not gone well at left tackle. They did bring in Titus Howard from the Texans. They brought in Zion Johnson. So they have some answers, but their offensive line was horrendous. I'm going to have them going with Fano. And to me, this is if he can come in and fill your left tackle, fantastic. But we have enough needs along this offensive line, enough uncertainty along this offensive line. I know they brought in Elgton Jenkins. There's some good names there, but I would not say any of these guys are so good that you don't want to just add a blue chipper, which I think Fano is. He's going to be a 10-year solve at some position. Will it be tackle? We don't know. But when the Browns were really rolling prior to going out and getting Deshaun Watson and just blowing up their salary cap, it was because they had an elite offensive line. He might be an elite guard, but hey, that's fine. You get an elite player this high in the draft. I think the Browns play it safe. I don't think they're tempted by Jeremiah Love. I think they resist the urge to go a little early on a wide receiver here, and they're going to go with Spencer Fano, the offensive lineman out of Utah.
Yeah, it's funny to me. I don't think I've ever had the luxury, ironically enough, while we do these mock drafts, to research the Browns. I will just say that if the Browns were to do what you just described and took Spencer Fano, that would be the smartest pick they've made in the first round in what feels like forever. Mm-hmm. Maybe since Myles Garrett, who knows? I'll give them Baker Mayfield because they screwed that up after the fact. Baker Mayfield at number 1 at the time was a quality one. They could have had Josh Allen, and it sounded like that could have had some heat to it, but we digress. I like the idea. I like the pick. That would be smart, and it would be honestly a shock to me that they actually made the right decision. So I've always been curious every time we do this exercise, what you end up going with. You mentioned an individual that they would not be tempted with, and that being Jeremiah Love. I'm going to kill suspense right now. Jeremiah Love is not getting past the commies. Everything I learned is the commies are going to be sitting there, and I say commies, the Commanders are going to be sitting there praying to any higher being that 1 through 6 does not see Jeremiah Love come off the board. I think he is priority number 1 for them. I could see them even moving up potentially if they're getting wind of anyone, the Titans, the Giants, the Browns, any of them are thinking to get Jeremiah Love. And maybe they even try to say, hey, Arizona, we would love to take number 3. We're going to make Jeremiah Love the 3rd overall pick in this draft. I think that makes a lot of sense in the sense of the Commanders recognize they need to do something to help their franchise quarterback that isn't just conventional wisdom, get him a receiver and stuff, because Jaden Daniels is a little bit of a unique situation where it's almost as if teams are somewhat welcoming him to throw the ball, and you're just hoping that he's on a bad day. And that is what feels like a little bit of a 50-50 shot. And they have quality enough receivers right now that I don't think they're going to go crazy for a Cardinal Tate or anything like that if he's available. But where they are lacking is a dynamic playmaker in the backfield to pair with a Jaden Daniels, which feels like it could elevate itself even more than your average quarterback in this league. Because if you're worried about 2 individuals in the backfield running the ball, that becomes a chaotic nightmare. So I just think Jeremiah Love to the Commanders also does make a lot of sense. And I think a lot of people in the know just believe it to be the case. And if the board were to break down this way, that is exactly where they would go. I would say that they also would love us. I will say they want a shot caller on defense, but I think the temptation of Jeremiah Love being there on the board, if he is there, he is their number 1 priority in this draft. So for anyone that thinks that there's a potential for Jeremiah Love maybe to fall to 9 for the Chiefs, 10 to the Bengals, and so on and so forth, he is not getting past 7. If the board were to break down this way and it's a no trade top 6, and yet Jeremiah Love is not off the board, he will be when the Commanders pick at 7, as we have it here.
Love it. I mean, best player in the draft for my money. I think at this point in time, just get a good player. I think if Washington, the perfect draft for them would be if there was like an A+ wide receiver there. They need more weapons on offense. But this is the Commanders' way of saying we just need more weapons around Jaden Daniels. We're not going to force it with a wide receiver that we don't see as a blue chipper. Let's just get a running back who could end up being the best in the sport, who also is going to impact the passing game. People say on the level of guys like Christian McCaffrey, Bijan Robinson. He's a special player. And I think Washington would be very happy with that pick. That brings the Saints up. And the Saints are in an interesting spot as well. They're a team that needs a wide receiver. They have Chris Olave going into the last year of his deal. He's had an up and down career, a lot of concussions. They did lose Rashid Shaheed at the trade deadline, and ultimately he left via free agency. And then when you look at what they have on defense, to me, this is one of those spots where I think you could see the Saints go after a guy like Caleb Downs, who a lot of people think, again, I've been saying this a lot, is one of the best players in the draft. And the Saints just need blue chippers out there on defense, as I'm trying to DM Luka my pick so we can get the board built. But ultimately, when you look at what the Saints have in house at safety, they have Justin Reed, who's a solid starter, Julian Blackman, who's been a good player in this league, and Jonas Sanker, if you remember him from the Bills Saints game, was making plays all over the field. They're actually in good position at safety, where I don't know that Caleb Downs is a position of need. If you're just talking best player available, then yeah, I think that Caleb Downs would be the pick. But I think the Saints are going to look at this Kellen Moore offense, look at the weapon situation, and they're going to settle on a wide receiver. There's been a lot of talk about Carnell Tate, but I've been kind of reading the tea leaves, the guys who cover the Saints that I think are really locked in. And there's been a lot of chatter that the Saints were really clued into this Jordan Tyson pro day that happened yesterday. And I think the NFL has just been looking for an excuse, anything, to put Jordan Tyson as wide receiver one. This is a very underwhelming wide receiver class. Jordan Tyson, in my opinion, is the only guy that checks all of the boxes as a true wide receiver one. I'm assuming if his agents let him have a pro day yesterday, it's because he was going to kill it. Otherwise, why would you have somebody tank his own draft stock? So I'm assuming all went well. And based on the chatter of the beat reporters in New Orleans, it sounds like they're just looking for any reason to put Tyson ahead of Tate. So with that in mind, we are going to go with Jordan Tyson, the wide receiver out of Arizona State. It's going to break Luka's heart, but it's also going to be cool to see Luka get an Arizona State player taken in the top 10.
It would break my heart, kind of. I will say this. There's obviously a lot of hype in the pick that I have to make next at 9, being the Kansas City Chiefs. This would be, I would think, if we got to the point where Jordan Tyson's still on the board, which feels very plausible by pick 8 with the Saints, and he were to then go to the Saints at 8 and not to the Chiefs at 9, a big sigh of relief will occur also for myself. Because if we get to pick 9, the pick that I will discuss very shortly here, and Jordan Tyson's still on the board, I will be sitting there very nervous that they take him. Although I will say, caveat, as before I describe, I don't know if I buy that the Chiefs are going to be going at wide receiver as much as others do, including Schrager and everyone else in the know. Locals have, I think, a little bit more of an open mind to other solutions here at pick 9. But Jordan Tyson going to pick 9, I just want it on record here, may have me walk off set a little bit to get my composure and try to ignore things, because I will not be able to buy a jersey of his in this league, because there's no effing way I would own that red piece of shit. So pick 9, Kansas City Chiefs. I unfortunately have to make this pick. Reading those tea leaves, reading the things that locals have, I will say this. The national perception of what the Chiefs are going to do at 9 and the local perception of what the Chiefs are going to do at 9 are two very different stories. And what I think is interesting is it feels as if the national is looking at this as if the assumption is Mahomes is absolutely playing 100% week 1, which is not 100%. I think there's an expectation and a realistic mindset that is Mahomes will be going week 1. He won't be at 100%. And I don't think anyone believes that when it comes to his health, but he'll be capable of playing, and you're going to have to rip him off the field to do so. But with that in mind, they believe that it should be all systems go. They're going to try to make another championship run here with Kelsey returning, so on and so forth. And what they need to do is they need to get a receiver, a blue chip style receiver out of the draft to move forward, especially once Kelsey is gone. You need to develop another young, talented target weapon for Mahomes to keep this ride going. The local has a little bit of pause to it. I think a lot of them want something like that to happen, and I think Jordan Tyson would be the individual that a lot of them have circled. But especially in this case where he's not available, I actually don't even know if necessarily that would be truly where they go. The Chiefs have always done something very interesting of late, where it comes to they don't pay defensive backs. They develop them, and they develop them very, very, very well. They get the absolute most, and especially like to invest in blue chip guys in the draft that then they've developed even further. And then they end up shipping off to get more assets and do this whole song and dance over and over again. The latest edition of this was Trent McDuffie, of course. He now is the highest paid corner. I'm just going to say that because he might be one of the highest paid defenders, although what's his name in Houston just got paid a big extension, so that definitely can't be the case. But overall, McDuffie was moved out. That's how the Chiefs also have pick 29, but there's even potential for the Chiefs to be looking at a blue chip corner asset in the draft here at pick 9 that I think, even with Tyson on the board, there's a very, very real chance that they end up going with. I haven't made this yet, so I will have to do so after I make my pick. They're going to go with Mansour Delaney, corner out of LSU. I think he checks a ton of boxes for what the Chiefs look for in a corner. I think he's one of the most instinctive corners in this class, if not the most instinctive. And he's also just a very, very good athlete on top of it all. I think realistically, the question marks are minimal-ish for him compared to pretty much everyone else in this draft. I would say it's hard to kind of find a fault to his game, and it feels as if he would become that perfect development replacement for McDuffie leaving, that their corner cabinet right now is so barren that they need to do something with it, not necessarily just for the now, but even the future. Furthermore, that Mansour Delaney or Delane, however you pronunciate it, is absolutely the guy they're going to go for in this position here. That I even had him as my top priority on our list, because if anyone's new to this, Josh and I we don't share what we do before this episode, so you have to write out a couple guys you might go with these picks that we do our research for. And I had him as my number one on this. Jordan Tyson, for what it's worth, was written down second. Mansour Delane is just it not, in my opinion, the best corner in the draft, but I fully respect anyone that believes him to be the best corner in the draft. And I think the only reason that he is currently listed as the number one corner of this draft is just because the other one has a little bit more injury concerns to him and had a major injury he recovered from recently. That I think Delane just feels like he is going to become a Chief here at 9. And it just makes a lot of sense for how the Chiefs have handled business with these blue chip picks in the recent past, that they just want to develop these top end corners that they keep having and not have to pay them. And we're finding them at the beginning of that rotation, we'll call it, right now here in this 2026 draft.
Yeah, I like these corners in this draft. Like, there's no Sauce Gardner, there's no Derek Stingley, but these are some good corners in this draft. And then there's another guy that if injuries weren't a concern, I think he'd be in this conversation as well. And we'll get to him, I'm sure, before the Bills pick. But this is a smart pick by the Chiefs. They were, by a lot of their own doing, because they traded away McDuffie. This offseason has taken a hit on their secondary, and they address it in a big way. And that is going to bring us to the Bengals. As the Chiefs have a rare top 10 pick, the Bengals have a top 10 pick as well. And interesting stat that I heard about the Bengals doing some research. Now, it's not going to actually matter here. It was more about whether they would take David Bailey or not, but he's long gone. Is the Bengals have never taken, or the last non-quarterback first round pick they've spent on a player who was 23 years of age or older was William Jackson. So a long time ago. So that they love prioritizing youth. And when you look at the Bengals, everybody pretty much knows the story on this team. Their offense is a juggernaut when they're healthy. They can't stay healthy, particularly Burrow. And their defense is Swiss cheese. They lost Trey Hendrickson. They have needs all over the defense and desperately need a defensive playmaker. Right now, Luka, there are two defensive standouts that are staring me in the face. One is Ruben Bain, and the other is Caleb Downs. So let's go one by one. Ruben Bain makes a lot of sense because they did lose Trey Hendrickson officially after not really having him at all last season. He is now a Baltimore Raven. And then with Caleb Downs, it just is one of those things where at some point somebody's going to roll the dice on the talent and just say, I don't know if we have a screaming need here, but we need this player. When I look at what the Bengals have, this offseason, they went out and signed Boye Mafe, and they still have Miles Murphy, who they spent a first-round pick on a couple seasons ago. The cupboard is not bare there. At safety, though, they have Dax Hill, who has not worked out for them. He's actually been playing more cornerback than safety. They went out and signed Kyle Duggar from the Patriots, who I don't believe is some sort of full-time answer. And that leads me to they need a playmaker in their secondary. They need somebody that can come out there and really be their best player on defense at this point in time. And that is why I'm going to go with the Ohio State safety, Caleb Downs, at pick number 10 to the Cincinnati Bengals.
This is my best player in the draft. I will just put that on record. I think Caleb Downs, from the first moment you watched him even at Alabama, you're like, this is an NFL player. And that's crazy. And on top of it all, I say that, and you even heard quotes of Nick Saban saying those things, where the moment he came in and practiced with Alabama caliber players, he went, that's an NFL player. This guy is different. From the day he stepped on a field for that team, he is special. He then goes to Ohio State and just elevates his game even more so. He's an absolute freak of a talent. I think the Bengals, I've seen some teams or some individuals say that the Bengals, if Caleb Downs is there, shouldn't be doing that because positional value tells you not to do that. I think that's asinine because the Bengals have so many problems on defense. You just need the best dog right now to straighten shit out. And you had one right down the road from you showing exactly why he is an absolute freak. He will be the leader of your defense probably on day one. He will be the alpha. He will control everything. And there is, as a team that used to have 2 all-pro safeties, there is nothing wrong with having elite top-end safeties controlling shit in front of them. And Caleb Downs would become and will become that guy for them. That I think it's crazy just because he's a safety, he falls to 10. But also at the same time, I fully grasp it based on how the rest of the board breaks down. And it would just be so frustrating as a Bills fan to see Caleb Downs go and become a Bengal and potentially for the next 4 years kind of Band-Aid and solve their problems right out the gate, in my opinion, because I truly believe he is the best player in this draft. All right. Apologies. Number 11 here. I'm going to take a swig of water. I get the luxury of doing the first Dolphins pick in this draft. We will not be hitting the second one. I'm going to go on mute again here. Random tickle in the back of my throat. We will not be doing the second one because the Dolphins currently also hold pick 30 in the draft. What I will say is this was definitely a much more straightforward thought process when it comes to the Dolphins at pick 11. It is one where I could see maybe them flirting around with the idea of moving up even further to if they seem to like someone else at this position that they feel might be taken as, I don't know, pick 8. They want wide receiver at pick 11. They want the best wide receiver on their board. They want to bolster the receiver and get the best guy they love the most in this spot. And if they are not moving up and the board has broken down the way it is, I think they would still be very, very happy. I think there are 3 guys that they love above everyone else in this draft. I believe they are big on Jordan Tyson. I believe they are one of the teams that rate, Sorry, I'm blanking for a second. Omar Cooper Jr. higher than most. But they also love an individual by the name of Cardell Tate out of Ohio State. And overall, I think they are just going to take the best receiver on the board possible if they sit at 11. Like I said, if they, for any reason, rate Jordan Tyson a true notch above those other 2, I could see them absolutely moving up and potentially trading to go get him. But I don't think that that's going to be for sure what they do. And they will still be happy at 11 just because I think the national media is driving the Chiefs being big on wide receiver more than what it feels like is actually going to happen. And then from there, if they get to, if the Bengals do what they do, they're going to have their pick of the litter. So Cardell Tate for them, I think checks a lot of boxes as to providing them what feels like a more, I'm going to call it real number 1 receiver, as they had years of Tyreek Hill, respect to Tyreek Hill and stuff like that. But as they're reshaping things, they're almost going to try to get away from this. Everyone needs to be sub 4.3 fast. And they're going to just try to get a dominant number 1 receiver who is capable of doing everything you ask of him, not just run fast down the field. That Cardell Tate is a fascinating and well-polished receiver. He doesn't have that second, third gear to him like traditionally we've seen of recent with the Dolphins at receiver. And I don't think that's necessarily a problem for them. It just does feel like, though, at 11, they're going to take the best guy possible. And I think Cardell Tate is going to be their guy in this scenario at 11.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. When you look at what the Dolphins have at wide receiver, it is bare. They lost Tyreek Hill, obviously, with the injury. They trade away Jalen Waddle. They have Malik Washington, Tutu Atwell, Jalen Tolbert, Terrace Marshall Jr. They need some names if they're ever going to find out what Malik Willis has at quarterback and give him a fair shot. So Cardell Tate, I don't think he's a true blue wide receiver 1, but he's a good enough prospect that it makes sense here. And I think he's instantly the best wide receiver on that team. All right. Well, that brings us to the Cowboys, who do not need wide receiver help. They're absolutely loaded with CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. But the Cowboys, much like the team I picked for 2 picks ago, the Bengals need defense, defense, defense. Now, look, Luka mentioned this off the air to me. I think the Cowboys are one of a handful of teams that are going to be aggressively trying to trade up. They have a lot of draft capital in their pocket that I think will be burning a hole in their pocket. I think they would be a team that would be trying to do everything they could to get a Caleb Downs or even trade up and get their hands on a Sonny Styles or an Arvell Reese. But in this mock draft, I think the Cowboys get kind of lucky because for the way I see it, they still get a blue chip defensive player that falls in their lap. And by that, I'm going to go with Reuben Bain Jr. I think you could make the argument he's rated up there with Reese and Bailey. People don't like his short arms, but his bend is incredible. And, the Cowboys, when they traded away Micah Parsons, they left themselves a massive hole at edge. They got Rashawn Gary back in the trade. He's okay. Donovan Ezuriku is useful, but he's no like 3-down threat. They need a stud out there. And I think Reuben Bain has a chance to be that for the Dallas Cowboys. I think they're a bit lucky. I do expect them to be a team that tries to get up in the top 10 and trade out. I think a team like the Browns would be very happy to get out of that 6th spot and maybe try to pick a guy like Fanow at 12. That makes a lot of sense to me, depending on how the board goes. But no trades in this draft. Cowboys get lucky with how the board goes, in my opinion, and they get a top 10 quality player at 12 with Reuben Bain.
Yeah, as we were doing this, I actually was sitting here. I think it was the Jeremiah Love pick, and then you were doing Jordan Tyson, where I was like, that was the moment to me where I was like, holy shit, Reuben Bain is falling right now, that I might have to readjust everything. I didn't even have him noted for pretty much any of my teams up there, just because the only one would have been the Cardinals. But I think, unfortunately for Reuben Bain, he had a recent incident that came up to light, although it was an older incident that may have kind of tilted the scale, we'll call it, towards David Bailey now for sure being the first edge taken, although you can call Arvell Reese whatever you want to call him as well. He's kind of a little bit of a hybrid guy. It's one of those things where if the Cowboys were to sit at 12 and then get Reuben Bain Jr., I think the day after we would get nonstop clips from Jerry Jones being like, I am a genius. I am the best at this. I am the greatest GM in NFL history. And it would just be pure content gold. But also I would say, I mean, lucked out, and that's a quality talent to have follow you at 12. All respect to Jerry Jones in that case, if this were to play out this way. All right. 13 Rams. This is another one. I thought it was very funny to me how it worked out, where I get the Dolphins at 11 and there was a clear positional message. And then I get to 13, a team that made a very good run and is a very good team. And then on top of it, even has quality players at this position. And yet it felt like there was a very clear message as to what they're going to do here at 13. The reason I bring up 11 and 13 is, of course, it's the same position. I think wide receiver is widely regarded as what they're going to go here. It's something they haven't done necessarily recently, mainly because they don't have a lot of first-round picks of recent to have a quality blue chip individual come in and make an instant impact from day one, but also fill the cupboard for future use as well. Devontae Adams, as great as he was production-wise for the Rams last season, he is getting up there in age, and Puka Nacua is obviously a star in this league. But you need to kind of keep restacking the cupboard when you also have these rare opportunities as a very good quality team to get a guy available up there that costs you essentially nothing to do so. They are the fortunate individuals to be sitting here thanks to the Falcons being a shit show last season, and finding themselves without a first-round pick and also without the player that they moved to get this first-round pick, I believe. I don't know where that whole situation is going right now, but we're back to the Rams here. At wide receiver, though, I think it's really funny. When we were doing our draft prep, there was an individual we talked about that I think wasn't the cup of tea of either Josh or I, but also I even thought it was funny that when evaluating him, when watching him both during the season and even after the fact, and seeing how he was stacking up and all of that, and you hearing what's kind of being talked about with this individual, every time I watched him, it just was like, this guy feels like he is a McVay style receiver. This guy feels like he is perfect for that kind of creative mind, someone who was able to get a triple crown style receiver in Cooper Kupp, now needing to get someone else to fill that style role for years to come, as they are in the fortunate position that they are here at pick 13 while still being quality and having Sean McVay. That overall, I think it's just too good to be true, but also too good to pass up. And I just made the graphic here, and I am going to pull it up right now. The pick that the Rams will be making at 13. This is probably, I'm going to call this my Tet McMillan pick of this mock draft. I will be stunned if Mekhi Lemon is not a Ram when we leave our draft show on Thursday night. He matches everything that the Rams want to do. He is going to be a very good quality slot receiver in this league. And then when you add the little caveat that he is a Ram under McVay and who is an absolute master at getting the best and the greatest out of these players for their skill sets, he will be moved around, shifted around, and you could easily see him being kind of that next style Cooper Kupp for the Rams if you get him at his highest ceiling when it comes to what he is capable of in a McVay offense. I just want to keep saying that, because do I think Mekhi Lemon is as good as Cooper Kupp? No. Do I think him as a raw talent ceiling wise is as good as Cooper Kupp? No. Do I respect McVay enough to think that he can elevate him to that level? Yes. I think he makes a lot of sense as a Ram, and overall, this is absolutely where I believe Mekhi Lemon will be going, 13 to the Rams. Call it my Tet McMillan pick of the mock draft, because I am so damn confident in it. I would be willing to put money on it, although I will not do that because I think betting on the draft is stupid. So 13, Mekhi Lemon, USC.
Makes a lot of sense. He just definitely in that McVay mold, and I think McVay has proven before he can take lemon and make lemonade. But I mean, Devontae Adams is not a long-term solution there. Puka Nacua has had a less than ideal offseason, so restocking the cupboard there makes a lot of sense for them as they try to maximize whatever window Matthew Stafford has left. The Baltimore Ravens, having a rare top half of the draft pick after a disappointing season, come in with a bunch of needs. They lost Tyler Linderbaum in free agency. They could still use more front seven help despite getting Trey Hendrickson, and they could use help in their secondary. The way the board has fallen here, I think it comes down to two players for the Baltimore Ravens. They need pass catcher help. I don't think there's a wide receiver that makes sense at this pick, and they could use cornerback help. I know that they have Nate Wiggins, but you have I just had it up here. They have Marlon Humphrey, who I think is playing on his last legs at this point in time. Chidobe Awuzie. And I think the Ravens could absolutely be in play here for the cornerback, Jermon McCoy, who would be a no-brainer pick at this point, if not for the massive injury history. But the Ravens, to me, don't strike me as the kind of team that wants to roll the dice with such a high pick. And, you can think back to drafts past where guys come in with serious injury questions, and Will Johnson is kind of disproving what I'm about to say last year. But, you think about Miles Jack, how he fell and then never really became what we thought he was going to be. I just don't think the Ravens are going to do that. What I think they're going to do is they're going to fill the offensive pass catcher need, but they're going to do so with a tight end. They lost Isaiah Likely in free agency. Mark Andrews has a 1-year deal. And when you look at what the Ravens did this offseason, getting rid of John Harbaugh, bringing in DeClan Doyle as their offensive coordinator, he came from Chicago, where last year, despite having a reliable veteran tight end in Cole Kmet, they went out and drafted Colston Loveland in the first round. The Ravens get a freakishly athletic tight end in Kenyon Sadiq to come in and be an offensive weapon. I would say he'll probably be the tight end 2 for the Ravens, but he'll be on the field a lot and just another weapon for Lamar Jackson. And it wouldn't surprise me if in one calendar year, if he and Zay Flowers are the 1 and 1A on the Ravens as far as pass catching targets. An elite option for the Ravens. I don't think they're tempted by the injured cornerback, and I think they just go with the tight end that feels like somewhat of a sure thing.
Yeah, you messaged that to me, and I just was like, it just smells like classic Ravens. It just smells like quality, high floor. Like, it's not necessarily, we'll not call it the Kyle Hamilton style level of pick, but at the same time, when you look at what their roster is and what their needs are and how they've played and what Lamar likes even on top of it and stuff like that, and you just have this one unicorn sitting in this class that is Kenyon Sadiq, and it's like, hey, this guy needs to be ours essentially. And he makes a lot of sense on top of it being a BPA candidate, potentially even here, although there are a lot of, we'll call it edges and stuff like that could make sense. It's like, no, the Ravens understand also the level that he is above the rest compared to edges that they might be able to potentially get later on down the road, or anything else need wise down the road in this draft. That Sadiq makes a lot of sense. And he does kind of have that little bit of athletic freakishness at the tight end position that feels also Ravens like capable. Yeah, I love it. Buccaneers at 15. Buccaneers at 15 is an interesting one only because I think they could go one of two ways. I think one of the directions you hear a lot for the Buccaneers is the secondary and even more specifically corner, because by the end of last season, they were struggling to get quality play out of their corners. And I do believe they even lost some of their better known guys in free agency that has put them in a tough bind. The other position, though, is edge and getting more D-line work and edge work and just not necessarily full-on pass rushers, but I think they just need quality edge play. That is, if you really look at it, outside of Diaby, who's okay, they don't really have anyone else. And they need to figure that out quick if they want to get back to competing in this weaker division after relinquishing the power, we'll call it, to the Panthers. So with that, I think they go one of two ways here. I think there's two individuals that they could go with. And this might be a little bit off board, but there's a name I've heard a couple times that I found a little surprising, but it's also a classic situation where I'm not going to act as if it's outlandish, because for this name to be named in this spot, there has to be a little bit of a flame coming from where the smoke is coming from. Akeem Messidor is an interesting prospect in this draft that I think individuals aren't necessarily quite sure what to do with him and where to put him on their board. Some of them might believe he is a later first, second round guy, and it's easy to understand that maybe his success was a little bit more linked to Ruben Bain Jr. being an absolute monster on his side, that this individual was kind of reaping the benefits of it all. But individually, if you really rank it down, he might be one of the deeper toolboxes in the pass rush game that if you truly isolate yourself to him, there's a lot of like. And I do think that the Buccaneers are looking for someone of his build and style that he checks a lot of boxes for what they want to do moving forward, that I could easily see them going with a Keldrick Falk or a TJ Parker in potentially here. But I think there does seem to be a little bit of smoke for the Buccaneers being big fans and potentially one of the teams you hear saying he is a for sure first round grade guy. That is Akeem Messidor. That I like him. I haven't made the graphic yet, so I'll do it after this, but I like him here. He is the one that I had written down for them. If he was off the board for any reason, I did have them going with Keldrick Falk. I think those are the two individuals they would definitely elevate above the rest. And I do think that they prioritize edge in this premier pick slot here for them, that Messidor is going to be my pick here at 15 for the Buccaneers.
He's a fascinating prospect. I think what you have to do is ask yourself how scared you're going to be of the things that may not matter. Because when you look at stereotypes, do you want to draft a 25-year-old rookie? No, that usually is less than appetizing. When you look at stereotypes, do you want to draft the guy that got to rush on the other side of the stud in Ruben Bain? No, that seems like, oh, he just cleaned up the scraps. But when you watch the film, this guy is a handful and a half, and he plays 100 miles an hour. And to borrow a term from Chris Sims, he just fucks shit up. And I think he's a guy that is going to have a long career in this league. And I love this pick. Now, the problem is he's 25. By the time his rookie deal's up, he's going to be pushing 30. And what do you do with that? But I think that thought process is a little outdated. And I think some of these GMs aren't worried about 10 years from now, because I'm not going to maybe be in this position 10 years from now. And you get a player like Akeem Messidor, who I think is every bit worthy of going 15th overall in this draft. If there wasn't the concerns about his age, this makes a lot of sense for a Bucks team that really, despite the fact that they dealt with some injuries last year on the offensive side of the ball, really continue to be held back by the fact that their defense can't stop people in big spots. So I like that pick a lot. All right, the Jets are up. The Jets with their first pick, the second pick overall went Arvell Reese, and that puts me back with the Jets on the clock. Now, look, there is a lot of steam right now for one player for the Jets, and you just have to kind of decide if you're going to buy the hype or if you're going to think of it as, oh, this is just draft speculation, and this is what they want out there. The Jets need wide receiver help. Last season they traded for Adonai Mitchell. That worked out really well for them. They do have Garrett Wilson in house, although there are rumors that he could be a trade candidate this offseason or this even draft season. But they did not have a receiver gain more than 400 yards last year, which is astounding in the NFL in 2026. They need a lot of help. I think had Carnell Tate or Jordan Tyson fallen to them, I think they would have been all over those guys. Not sure about Mekhi Lemon, how they'd feel about him, but there's been a lot of buzz from people who are really connected to the Jets, including Connor Rogers, who is my absolute go-to Jets mouthpiece, saying that the Jets are infatuated with Omar Cooper Jr., the wide receiver out of Indiana. And at some point, if that's what I'm hearing from the people that I usually read and look at for these mock drafts, I'm just going to go with it. I'm not going to try to do the math equation of, is this something they want us to think so they can zig or zag? No, there's enough smoke there that if they get us, they get us. They got me. I think the Jets are all in on Omar Cooper Jr. at 16, and that's who the pick is.
Yeah, I do think the Jets are going to like a wide receiver or a lot of wide receivers in this draft class, and they're just going to be praying, though. I will say I'm with you. I've seen some of the Jets chatter and stuff like that, that they are praying that 16 is Omar Cooper Jr. That is their absolute hope. Like I had said with the Dolphins pick at 11, I do think the Dolphins like Omar Cooper a lot, so that might be one that they heavily monitor and maybe even have potential trade up discussions if they feel like it's needed, if the board were to shake up differently than ours. But in the way that it's shaken up for the way we're doing this exercise, they would be absolutely over the moon with the fact that they ended up with a tone setter and a premier player on defense at 2, but then still got what feels like their guy to complement, their other number 1 in-house by getting in Omar Cooper Jr. and stuff like that. I like that a lot. I think it makes a lot of sense. That probably could be potentially we'll call it your Ted McMillan pick of this draft. Okay. 17 with the Lions. I want to preface this pick first and foremost with saying I easily could see the Lions moving up. I think the Lions like an individual. I'm just going to highlight it right now. I think the Lions like an individual that was taken in our exercise at 6th overall, being Spencer Fano. I think they love him. They absolutely would do anything, I think, potentially for him. I think that he is priority number 1 on their list. But I also don't think they would be wanting to move all the way up to 6 to get him. So it would have to be a situation in which he potentially fell past 10, that now they start to flirt with that idea. I do believe that the Lions overall, though, are absolutely going offensive line here. That is, it just feels as if something they absolutely must do. They have a little bit of a reshape work to get back to being a premier offensive line. They had a little bit of a down year last year. I forget the individual's name off the top of my head, but they had a retirement that they had to deal with on top of everything else, that they want to reshape and reface the offensive line to get back to being one of the premier offensive line units in this league. And I actually think that the second guy on their list is a little bit surprising potentially to some, because I do know that currently with what we're doing here, you still have like Caden Proctor up on there, Monroe Freeling. Some individuals do like, and I do think also Freeling is someone that the Lions have an eye on potentially. But I think there is a very, 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 very Lions feeling offensive lineman in this draft, because the first thing, when I am not an offensive line expert, the first thing I look for is kind of just reading the notes on individuals and stuff like that. Every individual that talked about this one player, one of the first things that they always say is plays mean streak, physical, dominant, mean. It's just always that repetitive theme. And he was a quality player at his position. He is not a tackle. He is a guard. He is by far the best guard in this draft. And I think the Lions are in a position where they could look at this guy, be like, he is our type of player one, and he's also a position that we could absolutely need and bring in and get useful play out of him from day one and for future years as well, to continue to be a quality player for this offensive line. I am going to absolutely butcher this name right now. I'm just going to put that out there. Oliva Vega Ione. I definitely don't think I said that right. Ione, out of Penn State. The Penn State offensive guard. He is Dan Campbell-like capabilities and freakishness and mean and aggressive. Everything about this guy's profile just screams Lion. Again, with the slight caveat that I do think they're absolutely in love with Fanow, Spencer Fanow out of Utah. If they are unable to get Fanow, I do genuinely believe that number 2 on their list is Ione out of Penn State. I'm just not going to say his first name. I'm going to have to practice that one by draft night. But once I make the graphic afterwards, I think Ione is absolutely destined to be a Lion at 17 if they have to stand pat. Again, I know that there's been some conversations about, I think it's Freeling potentially going here. I just think Ione is just more Dan Campbell ready than anyone else in this draft that isn't Spencer Fanow. That is where they're ultimately going to go, because also on top of it, they just need a premier quality guard to slot in there with everything else they have going on the offensive line. So just destined to be a Lion. I don't know if I'd put the bank on it, but ultimately I do feel pretty damn good about this pick being a Lion if they are not able to move up to get a Fanow.
When the Lions were rolling the last couple years, they had a dominant offensive line, and they have to get back to that for sure. I think we've kind of learned now that Jared Goff is not one of those quarterbacks that can overcome inefficiencies on the offensive line and still run a high-octane offense. So I agree with you that that's a great way to address a very big area of need with a player that's a massive value at this point. And I also agree with you that had Fanow fallen, it would have been a no-brainer for them. The Vikings are on the clock. They have a lot of needs. They desperately need a defensive tackle. They need some defensive tackle help up front. They could use another wide receiver with Jordan Addison, going into the last couple of years of his deal and obviously having some off-field issues. But ultimately, I'm not going to go receiver, and I don't believe there's a defensive tackle here that necessarily is worth taking when you look at another option they have. Harrison Smith has been a Wall of Fame level player for the Vikings, but even as of the time we're recording, the Vikings have no idea if he intends to retire or not, and they just have nothing else there at safety. And there's a player in this draft that I think Brian Flores is going to drool over with the way he likes to play multiple fronts, the way he likes to move his chess pieces around on defense, a freakish athlete at the safety position. If he were to fall to 26, I think it would be one of those guys where it's like, okay, maybe we weren't thinking safety, but let's just take this guy and figure out the rest as it goes along. But he doesn't fall to 26 in this draft. The Vikings are going to go with a very athletic safety in Dylan Thieneman, and that's their pick.
If anyone's been listening to our podcast when we've been doing draft prep, this is the born to be a Viking pick. This is this has to be the pick. I would be, we've, as Bills fans, we've heard discussion about would the Bills be interested in Dylan Thieneman at 26 and things like that. And every time I've heard that conversation come up, I love the conversation. I'm always open to hearing about it and things like that. Would Dylan Thieneman be awesome on the Bills? For sure. But I would just laugh in the regard of he's not making it past 18. He's not making it past 18. It's not if Jeremiah Love is not making it past 7, well, Dylan Thieneman sure as shit ain't making it past 18. That's how this is going to work. There are just certain teams that are built a certain way that look at a certain guy and go, this is our guy. If he is there for us, he will be ours. Dylan Thieneman absolutely feels born and ready to be a Viking. Makes a lot of sense. And I'm glad. I don't know how much your research did on that one, but I'm sure me just constantly saying it every episode we recorded about it was certainly in the back of your head, I imagine.
And if he were to get past the Vikings, it'd be getting exciting on our live draft.
Oh, if he gets past the Vikings, if that reality does transpire, we're on Dylan Thieneman watch. That's to me definitely on Dylan Thieneman watch for the Bills. I don't even know if they would necessarily have to move up potentially to even get him. But I think also he is definitely on the radar of what we have in house that Brandon Beane could even be getting a little bit itchy with the phones and maybe seeing what he has to do to make that happen.
That'd be fun.
A team that would not be in on Dylan Thieneman, so I think then Thieneman would instantly make it down to 20, is the Carolina Panthers. The Carolina Panthers, I think, are in an interesting position where I've seen some stuff about them talk about, hey, get another wide receiver, stuff like that. I think that's insane. I don't understand the thought process on it. And luckily, in doing some research on this, I don't think anyone that actually values what they put out there agrees with that sentiment. I think there is a clear way they're going to go about this. And especially with the way that this board is broken down, there are 2 individuals I think that they will be massive fans of being on the board for them here. I would say I personally rank Caden Proctor higher than the individual I ended up taking in this spot, but the Carolina Panthers are going to be going with offensive line here. And they are going to, and I haven't made the graphic yet, so I got to do it again. I'm pretty much, for transparency, you're going to be making graphics when Josh is talking. Monroe Freeling, offensive tackle out of Georgia, is going to be a Carolina Panther. They need to just continue to build up that offensive line in front of Bryce Young. You have a run game with Chuba Hubbard that's, was effective for them. And it can get even better if you were to bring in more big, physical, dominant offensive linemen to put in front of those individuals in the backfield. And they are okay at receiver. For the love of God, how many times does this team need to invest first-round picks into receiver? They moved up famously enough with the Bills in the back end of a first round to get a receiver. They got Tet McMillan last year to get a receiver. I think they now are in a position where they feel okay with the receiver position. They feel okay with what they have in the backfield, and not that there's anyone worth a shit to take in this spot at the running back position. They're okay with quarterback. They need to do, though, with that quarterback, a much better job at protecting him, keeping him clean, and they need to also get a little bit younger on the offensive line. So I think Monroe Freeling, tackle out of Georgia, makes a lot of sense here for the Panthers, and I think that is where they will be going here as we start to enter the 20s of this draft.
Yeah, it's hard to wrap my head around them taking another receiver. McMillan was an absolute smash. Xavier Legette has not done great, but they also who's their third receiver? It's not Corbett. Corbett's not the name, but they have a slot guy who's playing well, and Bryce Young turned it on near the end of the year. So I'm with you. They have to get better up front for sure. That's where the games are won. They ran the ball well last year with Rico Daldo, and I think that they just want to continue to build in the trenches. And it's not even like there's a offensive receiver here that's screaming so much value that you can't pass him up. All right. Well, the Dallas Cowboys are back on the clock, and I feel like had this board fallen like this, they would have been very heartbroken that Dylan Thieneman went off the board at 18, because they could still use some help on the defensive side of the ball. There's another safety out there out of Toledo, Emmanuel McNeil Warren, who I think will very much tempt the Cowboys. But I mentioned this guy earlier when I was talking about the Ravens, about how they're not ones to, take a huge risk with an injured player. Well, old Jerry Jones isn't afraid to roll the dice for some draft day headlines, and he sees himself having a shot at a cornerback that maybe could have been a top 10 prospect if not for those injuries. And the Cowboys certainly need some defensive back help. and they are going to go with the cornerback out of Tennessee, Jermod McCoy. And, this to me, if you remember the Derek Stingley situation, he's not Derek Stingley. He's not the prospect Derek Stingley is. In fact, you kind of have to remember that with this entire draft class. This draft class is a notch below most of the draft classes we've talked about at almost every position. But his 1 year of tape at Tennessee was fantastic. He played great man coverage. He's 6 foot. He runs a 4.4. He has great instincts, great body control, just really does not have a very clean injury history, unfortunately. It's the only thing holding him back. If the Cowboys doctors are comfortable with it, I could see Jerry Jones rolling the dice and the Cowboys getting a lot of A's and A pluses from those draft experts in April. And we'll see if any of that actually matters when the ball gets thrown out there in September. But for now, Jerry can take his bows.
I will say, I would also love this draft for the Cowboys if this is where I love Jermon McCoy. I think he is awesome when it comes. He's definitely what I will call my cup of tea as a corner. He is everything that I love in a corner. I think his man press abilities and just his coverage abilities overall are exceptional. And I think he's even a very good tackler and stuff like that. I will say I get a lot of like Kool-Aid McKinstry vibes from him, but I think he's even better of an athlete overall than Kool-Aid McKinstry. That I love the player a lot. The injury stuff is just, of course, the red flag of this situation where you got to believe that your doctor's got a good read on it and everything should be okay to invest in whatever you do. And it's I think recently, just on top of it all, on the topic of this player, I mean, Will Johnson for the Cardinals showed that everything's okay for now, and he became an absolute steal for the Cardinals in the draft, getting him, I think it was second round. I know it was day 2, but I'm pretty sure it was a second round pick. Okay. We are now we've now officially entered the playoff. Well, we have been, but we have entered the playoff stretch of playoff teams in this draft. But 2, I get the absolute courtesy, although it's been this way where you don't truly know what's going on. But I will say in my research, from Steelers to Eagles to Bears, none of these teams have any effing clue what they are going to be doing until draft night. I am just going to preface this with the read I got on the Steelers was, we're going to have to wait to see how the board breaks down before we end up deciding what we want to do here. That tells me 2 things. 1, they're smart and they just go best player available. And 2, they truly just have no idea what is going to be transpiring for the first 20 picks before them. And I think that is just the theme of this draft overall. They're not alone in feeling this way, but it's just, you really, truly, the beauty of this year's draft, even though it might feel a little bit on the weak side when it comes to quality players, the beauty of it all is that no one truly knows how the hell it's going to break down. And overall, we will have to wait and see what transpires to get things going. The Steelers are also in a unique position that, once again, they're being kind of held at will by an individual under center before they can make a decision on what they want to do. I'm not going to comment on it, but I also don't think that quarterback is going to come into play for the Steelers at pick number 21. They were also picked number 21 last year, for what it's worth, and Josh had them taking, famously, Shadur Sanders. That did not work out, and we all saw what happened to Shadur Sanders. I'm not making fun of Josh in this. I just think it was also hilarious that it could have made sense for the Steelers to do that, and they wouldn't be held at will by Aaron Rodgers, a 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers, now here also picking at 21 once again. I think the Steelers, reading the tea leaves as difficult as it was, have a few needs. I think there are 2 individuals currently on this board right now that will be very interesting to them. I think offensive line is what feels like a need, but also I think low key, they were very, very disappointed with their defense. And you do have McCarthy coming in as head coach. It's the first year where they're not going to have Tomlin there in a very long time doing things. I just think the Steeler way, Steeler football, and the draft being in Pittsburgh, I find it extremely difficult thinking that they're going to draft an offensive player, whether it's an offensive lineman or skill position. I think Steeler football tells you that they will be drafting a defensive player. I think they have needs on the defensive side of the ball. I think overall, when you look at the player pool here, there is an individual that is a big quality player to be taking at this point in time that feels essentially as BPA, best player available. That is the edge out of Auburn, Keldrick Falk. I think that to me feels like you are looking at an individual. Now, is edge absolutely a must for the Steelers? No, but I think Keldrick Falk is going to provide them something different than a lot of their other edges. That he would become, I believe, I don't have the measurables in front of me. He might be the biggest edge they'd have on that roster from day one. But overall, I think he is just what I will call well-rounded and run defending edge that they have a little bit more of rushing the passer happy edges right now in-house, that they need someone that's a little bit more responsible on the defensive line. And on top of it, I do believe this is a BPA situation, and the way we've done this, that I believe the Steelers will be going BPA first and foremost. So that is why overall I have gone with Keldrick Falk out of Auburn to end up as the 21st pick in the draft going to the Steelers while the draft is in Pittsburgh.
He's an interesting player because a team like the Bills, I think you'd see him more as like a down lineman in a 3-4. And the Bills really seem to be deep at that position when you look at where Oliver and TJ Sanders and maybe even Deion Walker, depending on how this draft goes, are going to play. But again, like he could end up being a player that he could, depending on what the Bills think about what they have in house, he could be helpful to them. I think he's a guy that could fall to the Bills, doesn't in this draft, but very interested to see what the Bills think about him in this particular class. He's not my favorite idea, but he fits the prototype of the defensive lineman Brandon Beane has fallen in love with in the past. But in this draft, he goes to Pittsburgh. We know they love their defensive linemen. They love feeding the pipeline there, and that's what they do. The Chargers are on the clock, and somehow, some way, this team made the postseason last year, despite losing their two elite tackles in Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt. And this is a team that they have needs, but it really does come down to, can you finally build an offensive line that's stable? Now, I think they'll feel good about the fact that Alt and Slater are going to be back, and they should be good at the tackle position. So that really should get them keying in on guard. The guy I have them picking is listed as a tackle, but I think at this point in the draft, he's so far highly rated ahead of the guys you'd be looking at that were guards that the value is too good to pass up. And some people do think that he could be good kicking inside the guard. So I'm going to go with Caden Proctor. Luka mentioned he was considering him back at pick 19. I think this is fantastic value for him here. And here's what I like about Caden Proctor for the Chargers. You can start him off at guard, and that's where he can have his home. But if you lose an Alt or you lose a Slater, now you have Caden Proctor who can come in and fill that spot instead of whatever the hell they were trying to accomplish last season that nearly got Justin Herbert killed. They have to fix this offensive line situation. You know Jim Harbaugh is going to prioritize it, especially with Mike McDaniel in house. They're not going to give themselves another terrible offensive line situation, and they get it fixed early with Caden Proctor.
Yeah. I think the value is great. And I mean, you can even see my graphic. I even typed him out as offensive line. I do think that there's definitely smoke to him not just being a pure tackle. He can potentially be just a quality offensive lineman in this league that you see him potentially move around and stuff. All right. 23. This, once again, first and foremost, is let's wait to see how the board breaks. But I do think that they do this with a keen eye potentially on one singular position. And this is probably going to break some Bills fans' hearts, depending on where you sit. So I do believe, first and foremost, getting it way out of the way, that the Eagles are going to be focused on the receiver market when it comes to both in the draft and the trade market. But in two different fashions. They will be looking to move in a receiver in the draft by then also moving out a receiver in the trade market. I am just going to put this out here that I would not be shocked that following this pick, you could also then shortly after hear the news that A.J. Brown has been moved on to other pastures, we'll call it. I think
Patriots.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Spoiler alert.
I think that the Eagles are going to go with BPA ish. If Denzel Boston is still sitting there, he feels like this is the pick and this is the place where he will go. I think Denzel Boston is a little bit polarizing in the sense of you could love him, you could hate him. I think also on top of it, as even though I am not the biggest Denzel Boston person, I don't think the reason I hate him, though, is because he's just the classic big man target receiver. I think he is a more polished route runner and separator than even some people, the haters that is, don't give him credit for. But overall, he's just not my cup of tea because I like receivers of a different dynamic level that he does not provide me personally. But as an Eagle, I think he fits a lot of things that they want in a guy on the boundary for them. And overall, they need to then eventually replace the production that would come from A.J. Brown. And if you're trying to match an A.J. Brown, not that they exist in this draft, the closest thing maybe in years come, which again, that is me just saying, hey, why trade the thing that you know works and get something that maybe could work? I think Denzel Boston just makes a lot of sense for the Eagles here at 23, and I don't think he will move past here. And as I said, there's going to be a contingent of Bills fans that are Denzel Boston stands that will then end up being heartbroken as it's so close and yet so far away, as Denzel Boston did not make it to them at 26 as he ended up getting picked at 23 to the Eagles.
Yeah, I like that pick a lot. I think there'll be some Bills fans that are a little confused that Denzel Boston goes before KC Concepcion. That's not going to confuse me. But I you know, I don't know. I kind of have those players rated pretty close. It makes a ton of sense. There's a lot of smoke around the AJ Brown stuff. Just Google Diana Rossini and you'll
whoa.
don't do it on a work computer. But anyway, now the Browns are up, and the Browns needed to come into this draft and address offensive line, which they did with Spencer Fanow. They could do that again. They still have some other holes on the offensive line. They needed to address wide receiver. When you look at what's already happened in this draft, Luka, you have Tyson, you have Tate, you have Lemon off the board in the top 13. Omar Cooper goes 16, and you just took Denzel Boston off the board. But there is one more receiver that's in that mix, KC Concepcion, they could go with. But I'm not going to have them do that for a couple of reasons. One, I want to see what we do at 26 if KC Concepcion is there. Two, that's not the purpose of this draft. The purpose of the draft is to do the exercise. Two, I think they are in play for this player. And three, if they aren't in play for this player, I think this is right about the range where somebody who is in play for this player would be trying to come up and get him. So with that in mind, the Browns are going to look at what they have at the quarterback position, and they're going to see Deshaun Watson, and I'm not buying that hype at all. Shedeur Sanders was fun last year, but I think we all kind of saw his warts. The Browns went out and hired an offensive-minded head coach in Todd Monken, but at some point, an offensive-minded head coach is going to want a quarterback to run his offense, and there's a lot of people that think very highly of Ty Simpson. And that's who the Browns are going to go with here. They're going to pull the trigger on Ty Simpson. With the 6th pick, they got somebody to protect him. And with the 24th pick, they get the quarterback, Ty Simpson. I don't love this pick. I do think, Luka, he's going to sneak into the first round, probably by trade. And I wanted to make sure I got that point out there. I don't know if it's this early. I think the Browns are a team that could certainly be in on that. But that's what we're doing. Ty Simpson to the Browns.
If the Browns take Ty Simpson, that will be the funniest quarterback room.
Yeah.
Like and then to have the vanilla ice cream head coach that you currently have there to try to mediate all of that. Oh my God. I will say I'm going to even put it in the fashion that I will. The fear I have is that the Cardinals will be moving into the back end of the first round to take Ty Simpson. Just want to put that on record, and I say fear because I want no part of that. If
Yeah,
I have
and I
any
think the
interest,
Jacoby Brissett news this week kind of leads some reasons for that too. Like he's not showing up without more guarantees in his money because he's reading the tea leaves.
yeah, and I'm not a fan of that because I also have an eye on the 27 draft, and it's like, yeah, I'd probably take 6 of these guys over Ty Simpson as it currently stands. Moving up into the first round to do that for a little old Ty Simpson, you're drinking too much Orlovsky tea to me if you're doing something like that. But if the Browns just stood pat and took him, I would laugh. I'd be happy, and also I'd be locked in on Browns minicamp news and all that stuff because that would be, training camp news because that would just be hilarious. All right, the last pick before we get to the Bills pick, the Bears. The Bears are a fun one. So first and foremost, I do think they go BPA-ish level. But I think they also don't truly have a specific targeted need, or even we'll call it 2 needs that they have in mind when it comes to this. And I think the fun part about the Browns pick here is that you have seen that reflected through the mock space and the national media and stuff, that it has gone from offensive line and offensive tackle to safety to edge to everything. It is all over the place. I'm going to make a fun pick here, Josh. I think there was one position that I just listed off here that I do think maybe the Bears want to try to get another individual into the space, but also have them feel as if they're a little bit more of a joker role. And this is a polarizing player in this draft because I think this is one of the individuals that you've heard the Daniel Jeremiahs and all the other national guys talk about how they've heard this guy being talked about, like they have him top 16 on their board. And then they also have him early 3rd round. I think this individual is all over the place and no one truly knows where they're going to go with this player and what it will end up. If I were to be a betting man, I would say that ultimately when you hear someone is going as late as early 3rd round on projections, that's probably more the reality. But I also think that a player that was drafted last year may have tickled the fancy of certain teams enough to opening their eyes to the idea of drafting someone of this build at this position to maybe fill some holes early on and be an impact player right out the gate more than you expected. And if you haven't understood anything I've said up until this point, I just seem to choose all the crazy names in this year's mock draft because I am going to have the Bears taking listed safety Emmanuel McNeil-Warren. Out of Toledo. I think the Bears are a team potentially that saw this individual, saw Emanwari and what he did for the Seahawks last year, and said, we would love a Joker style safety like that. Do I think he's a true Joker? No, I think he's a true, like, he is a safety. Like, I wouldn't see him moving to nickel or anything like that. And that's, I think if you're more of a true Joker, that's what you do. But I say he's a Joker in the sense of you could have him in the box, you could have him at the line, you can have him just in a true deep, safe, strong safety, and you're very comfortable with what he is capable at all those different roles. I think his physical traits and everything about him are fascinating. And I think ultimately the Bears could use a player like that on defense that could be a moving chess piece, moved around, and ultimately be someone that they bring in after losing. I believe they lost Brisker. I can't remember. I had it written down somewhere, but I can't find that note. I was looking for it. They need someone else to fill that spot that they could be reading some of the tea leaves. They could be one of those teams that I believe has him more projected in the first round. And ultimately sitting here at 25, I think they pull the trigger and take Emmanuel McNeil-Warren. And I honestly, I'm going to put this out there. I hope they do something like that because I think he's a player that would be a lot of fun as a Bear if it works out and everything's great, because I like the player. I think there's a lot to like about him. I think, just physically and everything about him, he looks like he's a lot of fun. And if you put him in an environment like the Bears where they need guys like him there and he were to excel, he's also the style player that in the Bears, it's kind of like the Steelers where I feel like the fan base and just overall, they value guys like that more so than other fan bases may. that I think he would be able to thrive and excel in that environment overall. That I'm going to go ahead and just pull the trigger on a little bit of a wild card here. And Emmanuel McNeil-Warren is a Chicago Bear at 25.
Makes sense to me. I like the player a lot, and I think teams are trying to become more multiple on defense, and the Bears will certainly get that. They got a big boost from Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, just joined their team mid-season, and he can fill some of that role as he now has become a Buffalo Bill. All right, well, speaking of the Buffalo Bills, Luka, the time has come. They're on the clock. And what are we looking at here? If you're looking at wide receiver, it really does come down to KC Concepcion. I think if you're looking at edge, there's a couple names that pop out. TJ Parker. And then you also have, I just had it in front of me, Malachi Lawrence, who has been pegged to the Bills quite a bit in some recent drafts. What's your head thinking at this point, Luka?
I said on our prospect preview episode that I think, would Concepcion be fun? Yes. Do I think Concepcion would make sense? Yes. But something just tells me that the position I'd bet on most for the Bills to be taking here at 26 is edge. And I think they would be looking for a specific style edge, and they'd be looking for an individual that could provide a little bit more jump, speed, and ability from a true edge bend perspective to get them that pass rush style in quick fashion that they don't have currently on this roster, because they have good enough edges. We talked about it in the last episode and stuff like that. But I think that there's individuals on the board right now that could tickle their fancy more so than a Concepcion, that ultimately they find themselves going edge here. And I think there's enough prospects here that make sense in this spot that I think they would go with that.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. And what would you want them to do in this spot?
I'm going to keep it consistent. I want them to go Cassius Howell in this spot. I want them to go for a guy like him. I think they don't have someone like him to play that edge role that has that level of jump in his step. That is truly what feels like a legitimate speed edge threat that will be able to get to the passer quick. Like any sacks that really happen for the Bills feel like ones that are by, overload design, whether it's in blitz packages or anything like that, and or just coverage sacks, just ones that developed over time just due to the nature of, the quarterback holding onto the ball too much and ultimately not finding anyone before being brought down. You need someone that we do not get sacks from an individual just beating their man clean so fast that the play's over in under 2.5 seconds. That does not happen ever. And if it ever does, it's because you just overloaded the amount of blitzers or rushers coming at the quarterback that they just didn't adjust the line accordingly. The right play is not in there, so on and so forth. So I think Cassius Howell is probably, in my opinion, my most favorite idea in this spot. But I will say, if Cassius Howell is sitting there and all the other edges that are there, I think are okay. I just, maybe TJ Parker. TJ Parker definitely feels like a fun edge as well in his own right. I don't know if he necessarily has as quick of a step as a Cassius Howell, but him being available there at 26 feels like potentially even better value when it comes to the ceiling and capabilities of him. But I think I think if you're getting a TJ Parker, you're drafting the more quote unquote well-rounded edge individual than swinging for a home run when it comes to a speed pass rush individual that Howell feels more so like. I don't know. I think that's kind of where it goes. And then from there, though, I would say like in play is Concepcion, that if you were to sit here and tell me, hey, I think truly that they do love Concepcion enough, they've brought him in. He checks. I'm pretty sure he checks every single box traditionally that Bean takes in the first round. He does have that first round vibe to him. that I wouldn't be, pissed off about it, and I wouldn't be upset with it, and even tend to lean towards it, as we are the beat the drum for please get blue chip asset level young receivers into the house. But I don't know. Just something tells me that Cassius Howell is the pick at this point.
So Cassius Howell. So are we doing this thing where we each pick one and we just post them both?
We can do that.
Okay.
I think normally we would come to an agreement on someone, but I think this year feels right to
Okay.
almost have us each pick one. And I will say, if we're going to do it that way, I'm going to be taking Cassius Howell.
Another name that could be in the mix people are thinking about, I think, is Caden McDonald, the defensive tackle from Ohio State. We talked about that on our draft preview show. The issue with that is a 2-down defensive tackle. You can usually get those guys later in the draft. And that's why that's not really great value at pick 26. I would understand it if the Bills would do it, but it wouldn't excite me. I think on draft day, even though I don't love the player as much as I think a lot of Bills fans do, I think I'd be exciting for what it felt like if they took Casey Conception, because it would mean to me that they're finally understanding that they desperately needed wide receivers. This isn't just DJ Moore and then everybody else is fine. No, we need to remake this room with weapons now and in the future. But they did spend the second round pick on DJ Moore. And when you look at what they have at edge rusher, it's Greg Rousseau at stand-up linebacker, Bradley Chubb, but they need somebody else to mix in. And I'm in the same position group as Luka, but I'm going to go with a different player. I'm going to go with Malachi Lawrence. And I think there's a lot of smoke around him right now. I think his play style is one that is more different than a Rousseau or a Chubb. He's got the twitchiness, he's got the bend, he's got the speed rush. It's something the Bills don't have in their arsenal. And I think he's similar to maybe what the Broncos had in Denver with Jim Leonard. So I would not be upset with Cassius Howell. I would not be upset with Malachi Lawrence. I like the options here for the Bills. And quite honestly, I would think if the board falls like this, their priority would probably be to trade down. We're not doing that in this spot. So Luka's going with Cassius Howell. I'm going to go with Malachi Lawrence. And that is our look at the 2026 mock draft. Luka, I love this exercise. I think it's a great way to not only think about things through a Bills lens, but put yourself in the shoes of the other teams. And what it does for us is, as we do this live show on Thursday and we go through these picks, it allows us to speak more eloquently on these teams because we have now done the research and we know what their pain points are and we know what they're looking for. And I think it just gives us good talking points. Like when you said that the Browns were going to, or the Chargers were going to pick, I think it was Quentin Johnston, and then they did. Things like that have happened, and it's been cool. Then there's times that I said that the Panthers would pick Kenny Pickett, and they didn't. So, it is what it is. But the next time you will hear from me and Luka will be draft night. Feel free to watch along with us. We will have the draft in the background. We will not have audio from the draft, but you'll hear me, Luka, Stokes, and we'll see what else happens. I will be enjoying some pizza. We just like to sit around, talk about the draft. We do it from a Bills lens, and we'll obviously react to the Bills picks. We'll talk about the other picks as they happen. Fans from other teams certainly show up. We have some Chiefs fans that show up. But as the picks happen, we'll talk about what it means for the Bills. And Luka, this is our 4th annual draft show, and I just look forward to it every year.
Yeah. I mean, I love the live draft show, just buckling down. My office is always hot as hell by the end of the night. It's always a good time. This year will be a little bit more special, I feel like, just because, especially at 7:00 that night, Josh, game 3 Sabres at Bruins will also be taking place. So I even gave you a proactive heads up of, I do apologize if I'm not paying attention nearly as much in the early stretch of the draft, because I'll be sitting there probably watching some sort of crucial power play and or penalty kill in the third period, as, let's call it, the Cowboys are picking at 12. It'll be one of those things. Hey, Luka, how you doing over there? And I'm just locked in on something else completely different. But no, we'll be here. We'll be doing our thing. As you said, we'll have the draft on our show like we always do. No audio, stuff like that. NFL, please don't come after us. But it's I can confidently say, Josh, this is our favorite live show of the year. And ultimately, it is one of our most favorite times of the year because we get to sit down for hours, share it with anyone that likes to come by and say hi, and then ultimately get to react in live time, both to other teams making picks, and hopefully we got them right and understood what they were doing correct, but then what the Bills end up doing or don't do on draft night one, that we can sit there and react to it together and kind of break it down how we feel like gut. It's always fun to get that organic initial reaction to things in general. Doing it to a first round draft pick, of course, is ultimately very, very fun because you can then look back, looking back to trading out of the first round and ending up with Keon Coleman, getting the likes of, last year with Hairston, or years ago getting a tight end all of a sudden in the first round when we were thinking receiver was truly going to be where they went, so on and so forth. Or you just react to Kyrie Elam and then laugh that you tried to talk yourself into how that made sense, and well, it didn't. So I love the live draft show that we get to do. We're lucky enough to do every year, and it'll be fun to sit there for hours on hours watching it all break down.
Sabres going for a 3-0 lead over the Bruins, and the Bills drafting a future Hall of Famer. What a time to be alive. And yeah, I wonder how that's going to be in Buffalo. Buffalo is obviously like a lifeblood town of the NFL. They, when it's like AFC championship game between two non-Buffalo teams, it's always like the two host teams have the best ratings, and then the Buffalo has the third best ratings. It's sports town. But I would imagine on Sabres playoff night, the draft, when they're picking 26th, may not do quite as good numbers in Buffalo.
Not early on. Not when you got a game that's probably going from 7 to 9:30, 9:45. Hopefully not too late if it goes to double, triple overtime, whatever.
Yeah.
The good old times that, it's early on. I don't know how often or how much the Bills or Buffalo market are going to be tuned into, to watch the Cardinals draft David Bailey or the Titans draft, Sonny Allen. Oh God, I'm so short. I'm small on my screen. I just butchered
Sonny
his name.
Styles.
Sonny Styles. Thank you. It's one of those things that it feels like we've never got to experience an NFL draft, Josh, while there's been Sabres playoff. That is sad. But overall, it's exciting that we now get to enjoy one this year as the Sabres are an absolute wagon.
As Rasmus Dahlin gets the empty netter to get a 2-goal lead to win the game up 3-0. We'll have the Bears putting in their pick, and the Bills will be on the clock. Perfect timing for everything. As the Bills trade out, and we don't even have a pick to talk about.
I'm trying not to jinx any of this shit here.
Hey, it is what it is.
All
right.
3-0.
For Luka, I am Josh McCarty. The next time we talk to you will be draft night. The Sabres will have had 2 playoff games since then, and the third one will be underway. The Bills will pick a player, we think, or they'll trade out like they did on Keon Coleman night. But either way, Luka and I will be here to react to it all, including the Sabres game on Thursday. And we will see you all next time on Bills Chat.